Hello everybody, and welcome back to Understand Release. Today we are going to talk about the Lumix GF7, which is this video is going to be the last camera review I make until I decide to make a larger video talking about the Mark IV third system as a whole. So the GF7 was a camera that I wasn't really planning on getting initially. I got it kind of by mistake, not really. Initially what I wanted to do was to get this. This is the 12 to 32mm kit zoom. This is a pancake kit lens, and what I like about it, this lens specifically, is that it's not a power zoom. You know, Lumix has a 14-42, which is about the same size. It has Olympus has also a 14-42, which is about the same size as this, but both of those lenses are power zooms, and I don't like power zooms. This one is a manual zoom, so I wanted to get this lens specifically. And the reason why is because I wanted to get, you know, a short, like pancake style zoom lens, because I've been using for my everyday carry like the 14mm and the 20mm on my Olympus EM10 Mark II, which I have been using as my everyday carry, but I wanted to have a zoom lens, and this one seemed like the best option for me. So I wanted to get this lens, and the price for this lens alone was about $100, and on MPB, which, you know, you have a warranty and all of that, on MPB the cheapest price for 12-32 was $120, and I wasn't really keen on spending $120 on just the lens, but I happened to find locally a deal for this lens for $150, and the only difference was that there was a GF7 attached to the end of it. So yeah, the lens and the camera for $150, I really couldn't pass on it. I thought initially that I would just flip the camera and get some profit on just keeping the lens, and turns out the camera is pretty okay. I have been using that camera for my everyday carry instead of the EM10 Mark II since. So I have some thoughts about the GF7, and I have some, you know, things I want to say about the cameras, about, you know, this form factor, which is like super small Mark IV third interchangeable lens cameras. There are a ton of them, a ton of GF cameras, a ton of like Olympus EPL and EPM cameras that are also available. There are also the very expensive but very premium like GM series from Lumix, like the GM1, GM5, which are very expensive. But there are a ton of like super small Mark IV third cameras which deserve that we talk about. So without further, you know, getting into blabbering, let's talk about the history of the GF7 specifically. And this camera doesn't have a very deep history like the EM1 Mark II I recently reviewed. This camera was released in 2015, and it was released at about the same time as the Lumix G7. And most of the things that, you know, are great about the G7, like the newer processor that gives it the depth from defocus DFD autofocus system, which really brought up the performance of contrast-based detection systems for autofocus performance for Mark IV third cameras. Well, the GF7 does not have that, because even though it shares the same sensor as the G7, it does not share the same processor, and as a result, we have pretty much the same functionality as the previous cameras, but with a newer sensor in it. Also, one of the biggest things about the G7 was that it was able to record 4K video at very low budget. This cannot do 4K video. This is limited to 1080p video, and it's not the best 1080p video. It's serviceable, but it's not the best video around. Anyway, compared to the previous camera in the line, which was the GF6, the GF7 has a number of downgrades, but also a couple of upgrades. The biggest upgrade compared to the GF6 is the new sensor in it, which is the same Sony-based chip that you find, you know, in Olympus cameras like the EM10 II or the M5 II, which is quite a decent step up over, you know, all the 16 megapixel Mark IV third sensor that you would find in like the GF6, the GF5. It's the same 16 megapixel sensor in those cameras as is in my 2011 Lumix G3, which, you know, you have about a stop of difference in terms of noise and dynamic range compared to the newer sensor that is in those Olympus bodies and consequently in the GF7. So you have better image quality from this camera. Now, when it comes to the downgrades, the screen is a bit of a downgrade, not the resolution or the screen quality itself, although I have some thoughts about the screen I'm going to talk about. But instead of having a dual pivot hinge, like the GF6 has a dual pivot hinge that you would find on most tilt screen out there, a dual pivot hinge is basically the same as this. You have a pivot in the bottom and a pivot on the screen itself, so you can have the screen facing up and the screen facing down, and that's pretty useful. The GF7 just goes away with one of the pivots, just has one pivot on top, and that's it. Cannot put the screen towards the back or towards down, you know, if you're looking at doing an overcrowd shot. It doesn't work on a GF7, you have to flip the camera over. It's on the end of the world, but it's just something to keep in mind. The reason why they did that is that they really intended this camera to be a lower end model compared to the GF6, which was a bit more of an enthusiast camera. I feel like there are a lot of things about the GF6 that really appeal to enthusiast shooters, but I think with the GF7, Lumix wanted to have, you know, a different view about those cameras, and now they had the GM series, and the GM series was the enthusiast level compact cameras that they wanted to sell. So the GF was decidedly more entry level, and so you have that single pivot screen, but it does this, you can see yourself. So that's pretty nice. For selfies and everything, it's always nice to have it. Another downgrade of the GF7 compared to the GF6 is the shutter that it is inside. The GF6 has actually a pretty high-end shutter for a camera like this. It has a shutter that can, you know, you have both curtains in that shutter. You have front and rear curtains, and goes up to 1/4000 of a second with a flash sync speed of 1/250th of a second, which is pretty good. Like 1/250th of a second it's the same flash sync speed as something like my Fuji X Pro 2, for example, which is, I mean, I'm not going to say it's incredible or anything like that, but for a small budget camera like that, it was pretty good, especially considering you had a proper flash and everything. On the GF7, we have the same shutter assembly that was fitted into, I think, the GM5, which means that you only have a single curtain, which is the rear curtain. The front curtain is going to be electronic shutter no matter what you do. And the maximum speed of that shutter is 1/500th of a second, which is considerably slower than 1/4000 of a second of the GF6. And that is also something that you would see with the flash sync speed, which is only 1/50th of a second, which is extremely slow. To put that into perspective, most cameras I know are at least doing 1/200th of a second, and there are a few exceptions to this. One of them being my XT1, which is slightly slower at 1/80th of a second. 1/180, if that wasn't clear. Numbers, you know. And the second slowest was this. No, it was slower than the XT1, but the other one was the G3, which was 1/125th of a second, which is still okay for the most part. 1/25th is it's a decent flash sync speed, even though it's not super great. But 1/50th of a second is really, really slow. So that's one of the big drawbacks I have about this GF7 when it comes to the user experience. So speaking of, how is it to use that camera? And is it really a piece of crap like I just made it out to be? No, it's actually a pretty good camera, and I don't have much problems using that camera, really. It's really a camera that I think is a bit underrated when it comes to the user experience, because you don't have a ton of buttons. You only have a single function button that you can repurpose, and if you flip the screen over, that single button here does not do the thing that you want it to do. It's just turned into a second shutter button for some reason, and you cannot deactivate that, which is a bit of a shame. But other than that, the camera itself has way more than enough controls for the kind of use that Lumix intended this camera to have. One thing that is worth noting is that this is not a camera that you use in manual mode and craft your exposure carefully and everything like that. This is a camera that you use like a point and shoot camera. This is a camera that is just basically a point and shoot camera that you can change the lenses of. That's it. That's why I've been using it mostly with the 12-32. That's why I've been using it mostly with the 14mm f2.5. Only, the small lenses that allows that camera to keep a very small profile, to fit in my pocket, stuff like that, And this is something very important, I think, about the GF7 is to understand that this is not a professional camera, this is not a high-end camera, this is a casual camera meant for casual use. As a result, you don't have as much controls, you don't have as much buttons, you don't have as much menu options, you don't even have as much like physical attributes of higher end cameras. You don't have a hotkey, you don't have a microphone port. This is not that kind of camera. And this is something that kind of changed my way of shooting with small cameras like this, especially for everyday carry. Like when I was using my EM10 Mark II, this is a camera that has an EVF, lots of controls, like 4 or 5 function buttons. This is a camera that is very customizable and is very enthusiast focused. The GF7 is the opposite of that. And when I was using the EM10, I was like crafting my exposures, doing things carefully and everything like that, and I was slow, really, really slow. But that's not really the goal of an everyday carry. That's like the camera that you get on the weekends or do your personal work with. That's not an everyday carry. With the GF7, I'm just in aperture priority, auto ISO, generally wide open because we are on Mark 4 thirds and the lenses wide open are good enough and you want as much light as you need, but as possible. But yeah, just let the camera rip. In auto ISO, exposure compensation generally set at like minus the 0.3, something like that. Just not really a super involved process. I just, focus about the composition and the focus, and that's it. So when it comes to the user experience, I think the GF7 is really doing what it was designed to be doing. It's not over-delivering, but it's not under-delivering, if that makes sense. The touchscreen in the back is not the best screen I've had the pleasure to use, or the displeasure to use, but the main thing with the screen is that it has a very accurate touchscreen in the back. You can go into the menus with it, can do all of your focus point moving with the touchscreen in the back, and it's really nice. The only problem that I have with it is it's very contrasty. So sometimes you feel like you have overexposed your shot. No, you don't. It's just a screen. It's very, very, very contrasty, and it fools you into thinking that it's not the right exposure, but it is. Autofocus works fine for casual use. It's not the DFD autofocus system, and it's about the same performance when it comes to autofocus as the G3. If you watch the G3 review I've made about 5 months ago, it's not a bad autofocus experience, but don't hope the camera to catch something moving fast or anything like that. It's not gonna happen. This is really much like a casual camera meant for everyday carry or casual use. That's it. Okay, so autofocus works fine for those situations, but if you want to get into fast action and everything, it's not the camera for you. Similarly, when it comes to the lenses, you cannot really use large lenses with it. The largest lenses that I would use would be lenses like this. This is a 45 f1.8. I think the 35-100 also works, but this is a camera that is really at home with like those small pancake lenses. This is really the lenses that you want to use with a camera like that, because if you want to use something larger, the GF7 becomes completely unbalanced and it's not really fun to use. So that's just something to keep in mind. I've talked about the flash sync speed already, but the pop-up flash, which is fine, okay, it's very normal pop-up flash. It can bounce up. It's very standard stuff for this kind of camera. It's not a bad flash, but the flash sync speed means that if you want to have a bit of field flash during the day, well, during the day, 1/50th of a second is already a bit too slow of a shutter speed. If you add a flash, you can have a grossly overexposed image. So it's not the best. When the conditions get dimmer and darker, it's fine, but in broad daylight, it's not the best field flash to have, and I feel like it's a bit of a missed opportunity to have a faster flash sync speed. Anyway, I wanted to keep that video quite, concise, so let's go into the verdict of that camera. So what I thought this camera would be, well, it turned out to be something completely different. I thought it would be like a G3 with a new sensor and not much more going on, but really the form factor of that camera helped tremendously carrying it to situations I would have never carried the camera to before. And it's almost the same size as my LX5, even with a lens on it, especially if I'm using the 14mm f2.5, which is super small. And this is the kind of camera that makes me think that I don't need something like a Ricoh GR3 or GR2, something like that, because I have something like that. I can put small pancake prime lens on it, and then that's it. I can call that a day. It's not to be used like a larger, more expensive camera, and that's okay. That's not what this camera has been made to do. And considering that those are pretty cheap, I got mine, as I said in the beginning of this video, for 150 bucks with that lens. Considering this lens cost about 100 bucks, I got that camera for about 50. That's pretty cool. I'm really, really liking that. And the RAW files are great. It's basically the same exact image quality from cameras that are much more expensive, much larger, like my EM5 Mark II, for example. Just the same sensor inside. So honestly, you have a good image quality potential. You can put some really great lenses on it. It's not super expensive. It's pretty small, all things considered. And it's a camera that's very good as a daily companion to your life, to whatever you want to do when it comes to your everyday carry cameras, when it comes to photography and stuff like that. This is a very good contender for that. And it's not super expensive, unlike some other Mark IV small options like the GM5 and the GM1, which has... The GM5 is basically the same size as this, but it's metal body. This is all plastic. And it has a viewfinder. This one doesn't, but this one has a flip-up screen, the GM5 doesn't. So I guess to me it's like kind of a bit of a draw between these two cameras, which one is the most usable. They have the same sensor, same processor, same shutter. To me it's basically the same stuff, but I want to have a flash with a small camera like that, and the GM5 doesn't. So that's the biggest difference, I would say, there, besides the viewfinder, of course. But this is, if you want to get this camera alone, I would say a good price would be between 100 and 130 bucks. I think it would be a very great value there. If you have to spend about 200, it's fine if the camera is really, really good condition. It comes with all the original packaging and everything like that. But yeah, I wouldn't pay much more than that, or even 200 feels like a bit of a stretch. Last thing I wanted to say about the user experience and the stuff like that. This camera uses very small batteries. I had a battery right next to me. Yeah, here it is. So these, like, what's the name of that thing? It's the BLH7E. It's tiny. It's a tiny battery. This is a 5 watt-hour battery. It's actually not even 5. It's 4.9 watt-hours. It's extremely fucking small. Okay, you want to have several of those. Okay, I personally got myself a Blue Max spare, so I have 2 batteries for that camera. I would not get out of my house with that camera without at least 2 batteries if I intend to use that camera not seriously, but a decent amount during the day. If you intend on recording some video with it, you want those batteries. It won't really work otherwise. Those batteries are good for, I don't know, maybe an hour or 2 at best of moderate use. Not much more than that. So get some spare batteries. They're not super expensive. They are easy to carry around. Just do it, okay? So yeah, this was pretty much my opinion about the GF7, which I think is it's a great little camera. But as a whole, I think having like really small cameras like this is an amazing perk of the Mark IV third system. You can have cameras that are medium-sized or larger size, like my E1 Mark II, which is filming me right now, and you have those very small pocketable cameras. And that's a unique aspect of the Mark IV third system, because all of those cameras, no matter the size or the weight or the price, they all use the same lens, they all have the same sensor size, they are all streamlined across the range, which is not something that you find in pretty much any other system except maybe Fujifilm X, but the small and light cameras like this from Fujifilm are much more expensive. So that's something I'm going to talk about in the Mark IV third system video that I want to make, which I will make hopefully next month. All of that being said, thank you so much for watching. See you in the next one. Take care.